What if I told you that one of the most repeated pieces of fitness advice in history is not just wrong, but maybe making you fatter, weaker, and broker than ever? You've heard it 1,000 times, from every gym bro, every influencer, every protein powder ad screaming at you from your phone. 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, every single day. For a 200-pound person, that's 200 grams of protein, every day. Roughly 7 chicken breasts, daily, forever. And if you listen to the really aggressive crowd, some preach 1.5 or even 2 grams per pound. That's 400 grams of protein a day. That's not a diet, that's a part-time job. But here's the question nobody seems to be asking. What if the science doesn't actually support any of that? Today, we're going to blow the lid off one of the biggest myths in fitness. We're going to follow the research, listen to 2 of the most intellectually honest voices in the game, Brad Pilon and Mike Mentzer, and give you practical recommendations that actually fit into a real human life. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might just change everything. Welcome back to Hypertrophy Now, where we break down the science of muscle growth in the real world. You can't build muscle without recovery, and training is completely obsolete without proper nutrition. Let's start with a question. Why does every fitness influencer, no matter their style, their training philosophy, or their background, seem to agree on this one thing? 1 gram per pound, maybe more, never less. Ask 10 influencers about training, split, cardio, sleep, supplements, you'll get 10 different answers. Fierce debates, team camps, competing ideologies, but protein? Suddenly they all sing the same song. Doesn't that seem a little convenient? Because here's what's at stake financially. The global protein supplement market is worth over $20 billion a year. The meat and dairy industry? Hundreds of billions. There are a lot of people who benefit when you believe you need to eat enormous quantities of protein every single day. Now, I'm not saying it's a grand conspiracy, but I am saying follow the money, and then follow the actual science, because they don't always lead to the same place. The bro science argument goes like this. High protein intake increases nitrogen retention and protein synthesis. Therefore, more protein equals more muscle. It sounds logical. It sounds scientific. It even references real biological mechanisms. But here's where it falls apart. Brad Pilon is not a gym bro. He is a nutrition and fitness research specialist who spent years working in the supplement industry, which means he has seen the game from the inside. He wrote a book called How Much Protein, and it is one of the most carefully researched, intellectually honest documents in the fitness space. And his conclusion will shock you. Pilon combed through the research, study after study after study. And yes, he confirmed what the bro science crowd loves to cite. High protein intake does increase nitrogen retention. High protein intake does increase protein synthesis markers. But here is the critical distinction they never tell you. Increased protein synthesis markers do not automatically translate into real, measurable muscle growth in natural trainees. The body is not a simple machine where you pour in protein and muscle comes out the other side. It is a highly adaptive, tightly regulated biological system, and it has limits, real limits. And then Pilon dropped the bombshell. He stated that in his exhaustive review of the literature, he could not find a single study demonstrating a meaningful muscle-building benefit from consuming more than 120 grams of protein per day. Not for natural trainees, not for advanced lifters. Not even for steroid users. Read that again. 120 grams. For a 200-pound lifter trying to follow the 1 gram per pound rule, that's 80 grams of wasted protein every single day. Calories burned on nothing. Or worse, stored as fat. This isn't fringe theory. This is a researcher saying, I looked for the evidence, I couldn't find it. And that should make all of us stop and think. In fact, I messaged him personally the other day to see if he still agreed with this position, and here's exactly what he had to say. Quote, yeah, it's pretty much exactly the same. You know, I don't know if you watch Stu Phillips's Instagram. I live around the corner from the university where he's at, and he was just now kind of saying the same thing. Not only the doses, but also the amount people need kind of goes down as they get older. So no, it's pretty much exactly the same. Only thing I do differently is I'm not a big fan of the needing to spread it out. So, I'll do 120 grams after a workout. So I'm generally between let's say 70 grams on non-training days and 120 grams on the days I train, and it just hasn't made any difference whatsoever. End quote. Now let's bring in another voice, one that the fitness world has criminally overlooked. Mike Mentzer, Mr. Universe, one of the greatest bodybuilders of his era. But more than that, one of the most intellectually rigorous thinkers the sport has ever produced. Mentzer was not interested in what was popular. He was interested in what was true. And on the topic of protein, his argument is devastatingly simple. He pointed out something that should stop every protein-obsessed gym bro cold. Muscle tissue is approximately 70% water. Let that sink in. 70% water. The actual protein content of muscle tissue is a relatively small fraction of its total composition. Imagine a water balloon. The rubber walls of it are like the muscle protein. The majority of its volume is water, not rubber, or in this case, protein. Now here's his question, and it is brilliant. If muscle is 70% water, why does nobody recommend drinking enormous quantities of extra water to build more muscle? Because the body regulates water, it uses what it needs, and excretes the rest. And the body does the same thing with protein. It uses what it needs and either burns the excess as energy or, when calories permit, stores it as fat. The body has no strong, dedicated storage mechanism for dietary protein. Unlike fat, which has an almost unlimited storage capacity, excess amino acids are not warehoused in your biceps waiting for you to hit the gym. They are processed, converted, and dealt with. Mentzer's approach during fat loss phases was radically different from the protein-loading orthodoxy. He recommended reducing calories from all macronutrient sources, not obsessing over protein while slashing everything else. His suggested macro split: 60% carbohydrates, 25% protein, 15% fat. For a 2,000-calorie diet, that works out to roughly 125 grams of protein. Nowhere near the hyped-up 1 gram per pound standard, and yet it works. In the real world, with real people, it works remarkably well. It keeps your muscles full of water and glycogen, which are depleted by restricting carbs. That actually does mean less water in your balloons. And smaller-looking muscles, and this brings us to a topic that is being butchered just as badly in today's fitness culture: carbohydrates. Low carb is back in fashion. Keto is making another comeback. And somehow, in the war between protein and carbs keep losing the public relations battle. But here's what the research actually says. Carbohydrates are not the enemy of muscle. They are, in many ways, the protector of muscle. This is what scientists call the anti-catabolic effect of carbohydrates. When you consume adequate carbohydrates, your body has glycogen-stored energy in the muscle and liver readily available for fuel. When glycogen is available, the body has far less reason to break down muscle tissue for energy. In other words, carbohydrates help prevent muscle loss. They are muscle sparing. Multiple studies have shown that restricting carbohydrates significantly impairs muscle growth, performance, and recovery. Not just a little significantly. And yet here we are, watching the fitness world pile on more protein and cut carbs at the same time, essentially robbing muscle from both ends. Here's the other thing nobody talks about: insulin. Yes, the hormone that low-carb advocates have demonized, insulin is also one of the most powerfully anabolic and anti-catabolic hormones in the human body. It drives nutrients into muscle cells. It suppresses muscle breakdown. It is not your enemy. Chronically excessive insulin from a sedentary lifestyle is the problem, not carbohydrates eaten by an active trainee in a caloric context designed for their goal. The obsession with protein has caused a mass exodus from carbohydrates, and muscle building is suffering for it. Now let's talk about fat loss, because this is where the high-protein dogma does some of its most real, measurable damage. When you are in a caloric deficit, calories are a limited resource. They are a budget, and like any budget, how you spend them matters. Here is the brutal math. Protein contains 4 calories per gram. If you are eating 200 grams of protein per day on a 1,800-calorie deficit diet, you have just spent 800 calories on protein alone. That is nearly half your daily budget on a single macronutrient. What does that leave for carbohydrates? For healthy fats? For the foods that are genuinely satisfying, that support hormonal health, that fuel your training, that keep you sane? Not much. And the cruel irony? You didn't need those extra protein calories to preserve your muscle. The research doesn't support it. You sacrifice satiety, performance, hormonal balance, and food enjoyment for nothing. Meanwhile, the person eating a balanced macro split, adequate protein, strong carbohydrate base, sufficient healthy fats, is training just as hard, preserving just as much muscle, and actually enjoying their diet enough to stay on it long term. Adherence. That word matters more than any macro ratio. It's true that protein intake increases satiety, but do you know it keeps you full and satisfied better than anything? A serving of protein with the carbohydrates and some healthy fats, that's real balance. The best diet is not the one with the highest protein content. It is the one you can actually follow. So if sky-high protein isn't the real key to muscle preservation, what is? 2 things that the fitness industry dramatically undervalues. Number 1, resistance training. Heavy, progressive, intense resistance training is the single most powerful signal you can send your body to preserve and build muscle tissue. Not protein, training. Your body keeps muscle because it needs muscle. Because you are giving it a reason to. The training stimulus is the trigger. Everything else is support. Several researchers have pointed out that resistance training alone, even on moderate protein intake, is a more potent muscle preservation tool than excessive protein consumption without training. Number 2, creatine. Creatine monohydrate is the most studied, most proven natural performance and body composition supplement in the history of sports science. It is inexpensive, effective, and widely ignored in conversations about muscle preservation because there is no reason to scream about it from every billboard. It's cheap and effective, which means it's not a cash cow like unproven testosterone boosters, for example. No offense, ashwagandha and long jack, we'll get to you another day, but creatine is king. Creatine supports muscle cell volumization, enhances performance in high-intensity training, and has been shown in multiple studies to support muscle retention during caloric deficits. If you are obsessing over whether to eat 180 or 200 grams of protein, but you are not training hard and using creatine, you have your priorities completely backwards. All right, you've heard the argument, you've seen the science, now let's make it practical. Here's what the evidence and the voices of Pilon and Mentzer actually supports for most natural trainees. Protein target, 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight per day is sufficient for the overwhelming majority of natural trainees, both in muscle building and fat loss phases. If you want a comfortable ceiling, 120 grams of protein per day covers virtually everyone at virtually any body weight. Macro framework for fat loss. Try Mentzer's 60-25-15. Split 60% of calories from carbohydrates, 25% from protein, 15% from healthy fats. It keeps glycogen replenished, preserves muscle through the anti-catabolic effect of carbs and insulin, and leaves you feeling like a human being rather than a protein processing machine. Train hard. Progressive overload. Compound movements. Intensity. This is the real muscle preservation signal, not another protein shake. Use creatine. At least 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily. That's it. Cheap, proven, and wildly underappreciated. Focus on total calories. Whether your goal is muscle gain or fat loss, your caloric target, not your protein target, is the steering wheel. Get your calories right and let your macros follow sensibly from there. Here's another great macro hack. Think of protein as the constant. Don't obsess, but try to get close to the above suggestions, especially on training days. The amino acids from protein are the brick and mortar from which new muscle is built. That much is true. Carbs and fats, on the other hand, are somewhat interchangeable. Think of them as energy substrates. This way, you don't have to be neurotic about macro percentages. Carbs go up one particular day, get a little less fat. Fat higher on another day, eat a bit fewer calories from carbohydrates. Keep protein and total calories within the optimal range for your goal. And carbs and fats ratios can fluctuate a little bit more based on what you ate for the day. This is where tracking is a great idea. Use a free tool like Fat Secret to automatically keep an eye on your macro ratios without stressing yourself out too much. Look, I know this challenges some deeply held beliefs. I know your gym buddy is going to push back. I know the algorithm is full of videos screaming at you to drink more protein shakes. But ask yourself this, has following the 1 gram per pound rule actually given you dramatically different results than a more balanced approach? For most people, honestly, the answer is no. The body is smarter and more efficient than the supplement industry wants you to believe. It doesn't need to be flooded with protein to hold on to muscle. It needs the right training stimulus, adequate total nutrition, and a caloric target aligned with your goal. Brad Pilon couldn't find a single study supporting more than 120 grams. Mike Mentzer built one of the greatest physiques in bodybuilding history on a 25% protein macro split. And real-world trainees are thriving on 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound every single day. You don't have to suffer through dry chicken and chalky shakes to build the body you want. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. How much protein have you been eating? And are you going to reconsider after watching this? If this opened your eyes, smash that like button and subscribe for more evidence-based fitness content that respects your intelligence. Stay tuned to the Hypertrophy Now channel for more science-based muscle-building strategies built for real people living in the real world. Train hard, eat with intention, rest, and remember that progress comes from cumulative effort. Not one perfect day of eating or training, but sticking with it for weeks, months, and years to stay fit for life. See you in the next one.